Joe Perkins, the Joe Perkins,
Oh,
Mr. Communicator himself.
yeah, I had a little brief chat with him. It was
You did?
exciting. Yeah. Okay, so should I go through this?
Whatever you
All right, any
however
point-
you, I don't,
All right. Any
you're
point
the
you want to interject
director.
something?
Yeah, okay.
Where did the concept of charter schools begin?
It's my understanding, Eric, that the charter school concept was formulated a good decade ago during one of the first waves of educational reform in this country. It was created to address the concern about parental choice, about school choice in public education. And while it was not necessarily directed towards the voucher movement, it evolved as another form of school choice. And I'm sure that in the early 80s, it was a word bandied about by scholars, educational scholars, and talked about. And it started appearing in the literature around that time. As the decade progressed, we saw some forms of what could be labeled charter schools, particularly in East Harlem and New York City. They say as a national movement, it really didn't take hold until Minnesota and California decided to put it in their law. And then here we are today with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts actually making it a major part of their reform package. So over the past dozen years or so, this whole notion of school choice and charter schools has really taken hold. So who knows what's going to happen?
You said the first wave of educational reform.
Mm-hmm.
Has there been a second and a third? Or?
Well, I don't think you can actually detail the first, the second, and third, but so-called educational scholars say that we are in the third wave of reform. The first was to point the finger and say that this is indeed a nation at risk. The second was to study good schools, the good high school, the good school. Ted Sizer, Sarah Lawrence Lightfoot involved themselves in studying schools. Ron Edmonds looked at the effective school movement. He studied some inner city schools that were doing very well, and his position was, if they're doing so well, why can't we replicate it? And now here we are in this third wave where law has actually said that now you can go about trying some of these innovative ways, and let's see if it'll actually work.
In terms of replication, is that one of the objectives of charter schools, replicating the working models within the mainframe school system?
I think one of the main hopes is that as the charter schools take hold, and if indeed they do, that the mainstream public school systems will take on some of the good characteristics of what's been tried in the charter schools. The charter schools will be the guinea pigs of the mainstream public schools, so the people will be able to sit back and look and experiment. The mainstream public schools will be the control group. The charter schools will be the experimental group, and from that we hope to come up with some improvements.
Why does Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and or the nation need charter schools?
Again, it's another form of choice. Public education, as we know it today, really is a monopoly. You live in a neighborhood and you must send your child to that neighborhood school. There are, of course, some exceptions around the country, but basically that's the model around which we deliver our public education. The charter school movement allows parents to have some choice. I mean, it really, that's what it boils down to. But choice within the public sector. It means that mainstream America can now pick a program that could possibly be tailored to meet an individual child's needs. So that you can shop around and pick the best school. So this is the beginning of the shop around movement. So I live in the town of Eastham here on Cape Cod. Hopefully I'll be able to shop around and select a school, a public school, and a particular teacher who will address the needs and meet the needs of my child, and hopefully set the stage.
So, what commitments will the Village Schoolhouse Foundation have to equity and diversity?
Well, one of the principles around which we're crafting our school is that we reach as many people as possible, students, teachers, community members, interested people as a whole. And one of the key issues that we are facing in the United States, but if we're looking just at Cape Cod, is the whole area of diversity and the equity at which we deliver public education. Schools have been organized to address the middle of the road to European Americans. I mean, our history has been written with that perspective. Our textbooks traditionally have represented, people looking one way. Even though we say we're getting away from the melting pot theory, that whole idea is very strong still, and there are many, many people who want to maintain that status image. What we're finding out is that even in areas on Cape Cod that appear to be monotone, people of one color, there is indeed a lot of diversity of ideas. Cultural diversity. I mean, even if you were to look out into a classroom today and only see children of one color, within that group there is so much diversity. So to present one perspective, to look at one way of viewing history or approaching learning, is really doing our children a disservice, because once they leave this area and go across the bridge, they will be in a multicultural, diverse world. The global community, of course, is shrinking. The other thing, from an educational perspective, we've heard a lot about multiple learning styles or multiple intelligences. Howard Gardner from Harvard University, in one of his major works, is now developing the whole notion of multiple intelligences, which supports that we learn in different ways. We have multiple ways of absorbing information. That in itself is diversity. So that a teacher should no longer be able to go in front of a room and just present an idea one way by only talking at children. A teacher should be able to employ multiple ways to draw out information and to stimulate and motivate students. That's another piece of the diversity issue that we want to be able to encourage in charter schools. So it isn't just diversity in terms of cultures or in terms of the colors of skin. It's the diversity of ideas, the diversity of teaching and learning styles that we have to honor. So the charter school concept allows us to really develop those ideas and concepts, and hopefully, they will be adapted by the other members of the school community.
In what ways are you deciding who will belong to the Village Schoolhouse Foundation?
The foundation itself, or the school? The school, because it's going to be a public school, or it is a public school, it will be open to the public. The main criteria will be interest. If you're interested in coming to the Village Schoolhouse and you like what we're offering, the curriculum, the teaching staff, the environment, the culture, the climate, the whole business, then you should be eligible to come. I think our only restriction will be the size of our facility, and because of that, we probably will have to employ some kind of lottery system. They use lotteries within the magnet schools, the federal magnet schools. So parents come, they register. If they're interested, they put their names into a computer-generated lottery system, and then based on the numbers of seats, as it were, in the Village Schoolhouse, we'll be able to access these interested participants. So That's the way we see it at this moment. It would be wonderful to be able to seat everybody, to have a facility that will, accommodate all those who are interested. But I think we're going to have to employ a lottery in the beginning, because I think there are going to be people from all over who want to come to the village schoolhouse.
How far do you anticipate the students will come for this distance?
Well, we know as educators and parents that parents will drive their children great distances if they know that there's quality education at the end of that route. We also know that parents honor the neighborhood school concept, so they will make certain concessions to keep the children within the neighborhood school. So you see, you have a dichotomy there. You have parents who will travel great distances, and you have parents who want to stay in their school, their neighborhood schools. We hope that we will be able to deliver choice within both of those modes, within the village, within the neighborhood school, and also through a main campus that will draw parents and children from throughout the Cape. Our application was submitted as a 9-town application. However, I don't think that we will be restricted to allow parents from, say, down in Sandwich to enter the lottery. I'm not sure about that. The state will be able to give us some guidelines in that respect. So hopefully it will be offered to everyone who's interested.
How would you incorporate values such as integrity, honesty, and respect into the curriculum?
Our curriculum at the Village Schoolhouse will be built around 4 keystones of learning. And we know that a keystone, when you think about an arch, the keystone is the middle stone around which the other stones lean against and add to the structure and to the foundation of the structure. So we have 4 keystones in our curriculum. And one of the keystones is a values curriculum, values keystone. And we hope that this keystone will be part and parcel of the academic, the non-academic, and the, you gotta stop me.
Okay. Well, you can just keep on going.
Okay. The other keystone, Michelle, help. The other keystone is community service learning. So it's the traditional academic keystone, the reading, writing, and arithmetic, the non-academic, the so-called non-academic, the arts and technology, the community service learning, and then the values and character development. Now, what we're saying in our curriculum is that they are not separated. There's no such thing as academic or non-academic, that each should infuse into each other a life so that the child will see, or the learner will see, the interconnectedness of learning. So we will be involved in values clarification. We will involve them in peacemaking skills, in conflict resolution, in a lot of case study simulation as a way to look at these other keystones. So it will not be touched upon as a separate discipline. It will be part of the way we deliver the curriculum.
Do you anticipate that the learning will be able to transfer into everyday life?
Well, isn't that why we are learning? We hope. The whole notion of application is an interesting one in that if you look at the way we learn, the cognitive processes, you'll see that application is the bridge between lower level or less complicated thinking processes, knowledge and comprehension, where you just repeat what you've internalized, and the upper level, the creative thinking, the analysis, the synthesis, and the evaluation of information. Application is that bridge. It's right in the middle. It allows us to go from the rote to the evaluative ways. So taking what we learn, applying it, and then looking at new ways to improve or to bring in different perspectives, it is an important process that we hope will be part of our learning and teaching. A lot of that comes from Bloom's taxonomy of learning. And for many people, the whole notion of creative thinking skills has been unattainable. They say that large groups of children cannot go beyond the knowledge and comprehension, that they're not ready to make the leap into the creative thinking and to the evaluative modes. But we maintain that that can be done if we purposefully allow children to go through those stages.
Do you anticipate that your program could be a working model for the large school system?
We hope that it will indeed be a model for change. It may not be a model that everyone wants to adapt. Hopefully there will be portions of it that people will say they like and they might want to try out. But we indeed hope that it will be a model to really reform education and take us into the next century.
In an article in the Boston Globe, Piadat Robertson was quoted as saying, "It's a risk to break the mold, to do something different. It's not for the faint of heart." Why would people want to take risks in restructuring education?
People want to take risks. I'll speak for myself. I want to take a risk because I know we need to change. We need to introduce some blood, some fresh blood into a system that's been in existence for a long time. I'll give you an example of a story that I like to tell. A superintendent I worked for many years used to say to me, "Margaret, that's a wonderful idea. I really like it. It shows that you've given some thought to it, but you know it's not going to fly. I won't be able to go to the school board and sell this because it's too risky. It's really risky business. So I endorse what you're doing, but it won't go. We just can't take those risks." And I used to come away feeling very frustrated, but I also used to say, well, one day I'll be able to take this risk. So the charter school opportunity is a wonderful way for us to take those risks. Some of them are calculated, some of them will not be. And see, it's a wonderful experiment. It's a very exciting experiment. So we'll be able to say some parts worked and some didn't, be able to move forward.
Wonderful. Is there anything else you want to add?
No.
Okay. All right. What is your involvement with the charter school movement?
Well, we're members of the founding group of the Cape Cod Lighthouse Charter School, and our involvement stemmed from being parents of children in the school system, and Don's involvement also is based on his being a teacher at the high school. And over the years, he's had concerns as to what kind of education he sees, especially students coming into his high school classes, I think.
Yeah, over the years I've been concerned about the educational opportunities which are being offered on the Cape for young people in the basically 11 to 14-year-old bracket. But I think this concern came home as my own oldest of four, approached that age. And then it became more than just an issue of professional concern. It became an issue of immediate personal concern to see what I could do with other parents having similar concerns to provide a more academically challenging environment in which they can grow.
Why does Massachusetts need charter schools?
Well, I don't think Massachusetts needs them more or less than any other place. It's a national movement, and Massachusetts, I think Massachusetts views that it's picking up this concept, in a pretty total way. There are various aspects of the charter school legislation in Massachusetts are more open-ended than in other states. But the reason why anyone needs it, according to the theory, is that it provides some intellectual competition for the existing public schools, and also just provides an alternative for parents who feel that their children's needs aren't being met in public schools. And really the reasons will vary greatly. I mean, some charter schools are probably going to exist in the inner city where the alternative is schools that are violence prone and all kinds of things like that. In other places, the charter schools are going to provide an alternative to schools that perhaps aren't providing the stimulation that parents and children want. I think that's more of our situation. Not that the schools are horrible. I mean, they're probably, in many respects, pretty decent schools around here, but they could be a lot more.
I think there are two issues here. There's the issue of choice. More and more educators are realizing that students have different learning styles, that students do better or worse depending upon the way the material is presented, the philosophy of the school, the particular subjects which are taught in order to convey skill development. And choice, the availability of choice is important. Now, this could be done within public schools, but unfortunately here on the Cape, with the exception of one very small school system, all the others have voted not to participate in the Commonwealth's school choice program, which means that if a student lives in a particular area, there is one and only one school that he can go to that's a public school at no expense to his parents. The other major reason is innovation. Education, to be effective, to be alive, requires that there be the possibility for innovation, experimentation, change. In small schools and small systems, frequently they can try things out. There is a flexibility. The larger schools get, the more the flexibility goes. They become very rigid. They become bound to a particular type of schedule. And when you're talking about sending 800 or 900 kids of this age group into one building following one set schedule, obviously there isn't the possibility of adjusting learning styles, of experimenting with different curriculum materials, and so on. And this is what charter schools offer, an opportunity to experiment and an opportunity to provide a choice.
In the experimentation, is it possible that there will be working models that might be able to get replicated?
Yeah, this is the explicit hope which the state has in setting up this program. When I use the word experimentation, I'm not saying that we're going to try something that's never been tried before. Experimentation may involve using methods which have been tried in other areas and have been successful, but for one reason or another have not been adopted in this particular area. So it's more the opportunity to be flexible, to try different approaches. I'm not sure there's anything truly innovative in education. What we're doing is reworking ideas and methods which have been developed in the past, applying them to particular situations. In our case, we're applying them to the resources here on the Cape.
What to respect here. Okay. How do you guys feel about the public consensus that the Lighthouse School is leaning towards an elite?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's consensus. I mean, you may have heard it from some people. The Lighthouse School is something which, we put out some information on. People have also drawn their own conclusions, and most of the comments I've heard have been very positive. If there's an issue about elitism, I think it's somewhat of a false issue. There's all kinds of elitism already going on in the public schools. If you're a star athlete, the whole school may revolve around your needs. And if you're a great dramatic performer or a great musician, you may find all kinds of things available to you. And we're really not against those things, but we feel that if our school is going to have some emphasis on intellectual development as an important theme in what should be going on in school, that's something which isn't being represented currently at schools. And our school is going to be open to everyone to apply to. The admissions process is going to be an examination of who will benefit from this type of school versus who will benefit better from the school. We're going to be existing public schools. But in all respects, it's a public school.
Now, let me read specifically from our proposal dealing with admissions. Um, Previous success or lack of success in school is not a determining factor in admissions to our school. I mean, it says right in our application, previous success or lack thereof is not a determining factor. What will determine whether or not our school might be better suited for a particular student than another school is whether the student has an interest in our areas of focus, whether the student is motivated to work in this particular manner, and learning styles do vary. Some students, I'm sure, would be better motivated, would develop better in a more traditional public school setting. Some, I'm sure, would be better motivated and develop further in ours. So the task of the admissions process is to select for the student the school which would best encourage his development.
In terms of the lack of school choice, how does that apply to Cape Cod?
Well, before charter schools, there was no opportunity to make this selection for a student. You couldn't tell a student, this is the way you learn, these are your interests, therefore this would be the best school for you. And before charter schools came on the scene, it was one size fits all. And regardless of how you were shaped, you had to fit into it. So we are providing another choice now, another way of developing basic skills, another way of growing intellectually. It's not elitist.
What are the long-range expectations of life at school?
Well, basically to fulfill the goals of our mission statement, which are to provide an interdisciplinary education, well, we could read right down them, but the broadest goal is to be an alternative school which meets the needs of students whose needs aren't being met, particularly in the area of academics, in-depth involvement in subjects, and I think our goals in a broader sense are to create more of a communitarian type of experience, a more respectful environment. Some of these have been really hallmarks of alternative schools, going back quite a distance. The view that the existing public schools often have a certain kind of regimentation, a certain disrespect for the individual, and if you mesh that along with their emphasis on just good underlying education, involvement with the resources on Cape Cod, which are very unique, and long-range expectations are to be able to keep doing this successfully.
I think a common theme in what we're trying to achieve is the idea of connections. The way traditional education occurs, English is separated from history, is separated from math, is separated from science. The classroom is separated from the home. The schooling is separated from the community. The theoretical is separated from the practical. One of the themes in our approach is to make these connections, because in real life, these artificial barriers do not exist. Real life is interdisciplinary. Our school makes the natural connections between math, science, between the practical and the theoretical, between the work in school and the support in home, between the school community and the larger community in which we live. This is a common thread running throughout everything that we're trying to do, not to make artificial connections, because the connections are naturally there, to show the students that the connections are naturally there, to help the student appreciate the connections, and to work in a world within which connections are made.
In the Boston Globe, Secretary of Education, Erik Peterson, was quoted as saying, "It's a risk to break the mold, to do something different." Why would people want to take a risk in restructuring education?
Well, to get the opposite of risks in this situation is to just stick with the status quo, and people aren't that satisfied with the status quo. Certainly, not everyone is, or there wouldn't be all this great interest in charter schools. So the risk is doing something new, and that's also where the reward is for a group like ours.
Yeah, I think lack of satisfaction with the status quo, for me, occurs on two fronts. First, as a parent like Don, I believe that the educational opportunities afforded to my children could be better. In fact, in some respects, I think the educational opportunities I had as a child are better than those which are now presented to my kids. On the second front, as a teacher, as someone who has worked in this area for 24 years, who has tried to improve the quality of what we offer, I still feel we have a long ways to go, that we haven't yet met our potential in terms of being able to assist our students in developing, and we certainly haven't reached the potential of our students in terms of their capacity to grow intellectually. We fall short. And even though the school system, even though the Cape in general is perceived as having good schools, perhaps somewhat better than average schools, clearly there's much more potential there that can be developed. At times we see this in the classroom. We see what the kids are really capable of doing. But unfortunately, this level of achievement, which we see occasionally, is not consistent. And that's what we're looking for. Let's give the kids the opportunity. Let's give them the encouragement to reach that level of achievement and development, which we know they are capable of reaching.
Anything else you guys want to add? Random statements to address?
I thought I had random statements, but
If you go back to the roots of public education, which actually are found in Massachusetts. Massachusetts was the first colony to have a compulsory public school system, long before the Revolution. I believe it was 1850. Massachusetts may even have been the first community in Western civilization where there was publicly funded public education. If you go back to the roots of it, you'll see back then each community, and the communities then were very small, had the responsibility of hiring a school teacher. There was no state bureaucracy. There was no superintendent of a district to decide what the curricula should be and to evaluate this and so on. Every small community, and we're talking about maybe several hundred families, would hire their school teacher and would be intimately involved in what was going on in the schools. So what we're doing here, in a sense, is going back in time, reaching back 350 years to the way it used to be, a community-based, responsive school system, responsive to the needs of the children, responsive to the wishes of the...
If you could just tell me a little bit about yourself
Mm-hmm.
and what your relationship to charter schools is, and a little bit about the Pioneer Institute.
Okay. I'm executive director of the Pioneer Institute, and the Pioneer Institute is a public policy research group that's focused on Massachusetts public policy issues, government issues. About half of our resources are focused in the area of education reform, K through 12 education reform. And a couple of years ago, we got involved specifically in charter schools through the publication of a book called Reinventing the Schools by Stephen Wilson, who at that time was a co-director of Pioneer. And the book proposes essentially a charter school model for the city of Boston. It proposes, in fact, turning every school in Boston into a charter school, or as the author says, an entrepreneurial school. And what we did at that time, which was again 1992, is took the ideas that were in the book and started peddling them in the state. And this was at the same time that there was a fairly active legislative activity underway in order to do education reform, kind of across-the-board education reform. And we became involved in that process, particularly through an organization called CEOs for Fundamental Change, which was created in large part as a result of Stephen's book. Through the efforts of Pioneer and CEOs for Fundamental Change, along with others, charter schools, or the enabling legislation for charter schools, was incorporated into the Education Reform Act of 1993. What we did at that point, upon enactment of the law, was to form something called a Charter School Resource Center, whose purpose is twofold. One is to help charter school founders. The other is to help the state, or to provide information and counsel to the state in terms of the process for selecting charter school winners or grantees. The work that we do, the outreach work that we do with charter schools, basically includes trying to promote the idea of charter schools, to recruit potential charter school founders, to let people know that charter schools exist, and to let them know what that means, to try to facilitate the application process. There's a process by which you send in an application and get approval or rejection through the state, and to provide some facilitation services to those people who are making application to the state, and to provide some what we call brokering services between people who are trying to start charter schools and others in the community who are interested in being partners or resources for those schools.
Could you describe brokering services?
Well, for instance, there may be a charter school founder on the Cape who is maybe a group of parents, for example, and perhaps they need some expertise in curriculum development. And we may know people elsewhere in the state, maybe they're on the Cape as well, who are expert in curriculum development, but who are also interested in charter schools and are looking for some group with whom to work, and we could put those two together. And it's a little more than sort of just looking down a list and, you know, they need curriculum development, this is a curriculum development expert, because there's a certain amount of common vision that needs to be shared among these people. So it's having knowledge about who is in curriculum development, who is like-minded with this group on the Cape, and then putting those two people together. But it's not just curriculum resources, it could be financial resources, could be a group or an individual who's got a facility that could be used by a charter school, getting information to people about mundane things like accounting, insurance, you name it. So there's a lot of that type of activity that we're involved in. We're also, I mean, part of it is just being here, being a focal point for people to come in and bounce ideas off of, which turns out to be a fairly significant and useful service, because there are a lot of people across the state who really have no one to talk to about charter schools. No one really knows anything about charter schools. And so they come to us, and we know something about charter schools, and we're interested in what they're doing, and we're sympathetic and supportive, and all of that is part of the mix as well. We sponsored, one of the events that we've done is we sponsored a conference back in October with the state, which was really in many respects the kickoff to the charter school movement, the charter school implementation at least. And there were about 170 people from across the state, a lot of teachers and principals, but people from all walks of life who were interested in starting charter schools who came together at that point. And that kind of event is also what we do.
What is a charter school?
Charter school is an independently managed, self-managed public school. And it's important to understand that these are public schools. They are not private schools. They cannot charge tuition. They have to comply with a wide array of state laws, such as the special education laws, the bilingual laws. They need to be non-discriminatory in their admissions process. They are public schools in every sense that the traditional public schools and school districts are public schools. The difference here is that, again, they are individually managed. They are not part of a larger system. They are part of their own system. The other thing about it is they are open to different elements of the community who want to start schools. It's not just the traditional education establishment of teachers, principals, people who have come through the education schools. It's open to anyone in the community, parents, businesses, universities, museums, what you might call private educational entrepreneurs who want to get into the education business, who have some experience, some credibility, and a passion for education. So it opens up the supply side of the education market to perhaps some untraditional players, but also to some traditional players who have been locked out of managing their own schools or designing their own schools, such as teachers. I mean, I think this is one of the big areas of attraction to charter schools, which is that a teacher normally is handed a curriculum, assigned a school, and they teach. But there is a very large pent-up demand among teachers to manage their own curriculum, their own classrooms, and their own schools. And this provides an opportunity for teachers to do that.
Where did the concept of charter schools begin, and how does this fit into the school choice concept?
Well, I'm not sure who the first person was to utter the words charter schools, but I think one of the godfathers of charter schools is a guy named Ted Coldery in Minnesota. He's been actively pushing charter schools and the concept out there for many years. And Minnesota, in fact, was the first state to adopt charter school legislation. There are now 9 states, including Massachusetts, that have charter school laws. I think the concept of charter schools can be traced even further back, though, to efforts within particular school districts to decentralize control over the management of individual public schools. I think the classic example is in East Harlem, District 4 in New York City, where the public school system, the superintendent and his office, over the course of 10 to 20 years, dating back now to the early 70s, essentially turned over the operation and management of the schools in that district to the teachers. And what essentially would happen is teachers would come forward. They'd be invited to come forward with ideas for schools. They'd come make their case to the superintendent. The superintendent would say, go do it. And this is where, pardon me? Well, the deputy superintendent was a guy named Cy Flegel, who was in charge of this particular process, this particular transformation. And now East Harlem is completely converted into charter schools. It's shown great success in terms of the performance of the student body, and perhaps more important or more interesting as an indicator is that this is a very poor urban neighborhood in New York City, and yet there are 1,000 to 1,500 students coming into East Harlem every day from all over the city to go to these schools, even from parents who can afford to send their kids to private schools. So in the context of great poverty and urban blight, you've got people of means and people from nice neighborhoods coming into East Harlem to go to school.
When did these programs begin?
Well, in East Harlem it began, I think, in 1972. So it's over 20 years now that this has been going on. And in many respects, that's the charter school model that I think Massachusetts and other states are beginning to follow. The difference, and I think the thing that's even better about charter schools in Massachusetts, is that it's not closed to just the people, the teachers and or principals in the current system. It's open to everyone. Anyone who's got, again, credibility and an entrepreneurial spirit and a passion for education can come forward and run a school. And that's, I think, an important addition to the East Harlem model. But the fundamental element of schools that are largely self-managed, independent, built around a particular vision and culture is critical to this whole thing and has proved successful over a course of, again, 20 years.
What are the
Oh, you mentioned about choice, too. Choice is a critical component here, because the only way you can have self-managed schools, each of which is organized around a different vision and a different culture, is to allow parents and staff to voluntarily choose to go to those or participate in those schools. The notion of subscription is critical here, in that the only way you can truly have distinctive schools with distinctive cultures and distinctive styles is to have people who are fully bought into that vision. And that goes from the staff right down through the parents and students. And so there's got to be this freedom on the part of all players to pick and choose where they want to work, where they want to send their kids to school.
Makes a lot of sense to me. On the flip side, what that offers is a fear. And in what ways could private and parochial schools convert to a charter system?
Well, right now, under the Massachusetts law, they can't. The schools have to be, first of all, public and non-sectarian. And specifically in the law, private schools and parochial schools are prohibited from becoming or converting to charter schools. So there's a bit of a wall that's been built up between these charter schools and private and parochial schools.
What kind of solutions from charter schools do you anticipate will be replicated in the public system?
Well, I think there are two areas of replication, or two areas that provide a lot of promise for replication. One is in the area of curriculum and what I might more broadly call content, which I think is in many respects the focus of most of the discussion around replication, because these are to some extent experimental schools or laboratories, if you will, where new things can be tried, and if to the degree they're successful, can be theoretically replicated in the traditional public schools. I personally think that that will certainly happen, but that's not the most important area of replication, or the most important opportunity, because there have been experimental programs in the traditional public schools forever, and some of them get replicated, most of them don't, successful or not. The thing that I think is most significant, and is, I hope, the area that the schools, the traditional public schools will take and replicate, has to do with the structure of the schools, both in terms of how the schools are managed internally and the general structure or framework within which charter schools exist, meaning this concept of independent, self-managed schools. So as East Harlem transformed itself, I think other districts can transform themselves along the charter school model, releasing the schools, releasing the staff to manage the schools independently, separately from one another, allow distinctive cultures to emerge, allow parents and staff to choose the schools that they participate in. I think one of the fundamental problems in public education is this model, which is assumed to be unchangeable and handed down from God, that says a school district is managed by the superintendent and the school department and the Board of Education, or the school committee. And I think that needs to be re-examined, and I think rejected in the end, because based on the experience of East Harlem and other places, the best level at which to organize education is at the school level, not at the school district level. And I think superintendents, school committees, politicians need to back off and turn the job of public education over to the educators, as well as to the parents.
In what ways will charter schools detract from other public schools?
Well, I think my basic belief is that they don't really detract. There is a certain amount of competition set up because students who are in the traditional public schools can now choose to go to one of these charter schools. And under the law, there's a certain amount of money, essentially a tuition, a per-student tuition, that follows that student. And so they're certainly in competition to that extent. I would like to think, and hope that it's true, that the school districts, the school departments, the school committees view their role as providing public education to children, as opposed to protecting or expanding their own turf. And if you think about this as a turf struggle, then yes, there is absolutely competition, and school departments should be worried about it. If they think about it in terms of educating the population of students in that town, then I think there's no competition at all. They should be partners. I mean, they're both providing public education. That's what it's all about.
In an article in the Boston Globe, the Secretary of Education, Erik Peterson, was quoted as saying, "It's a risk to break the mold, to do something different. It's not for the faint of heart." Why would people want to take risks in restructuring education?
Well, I guess there risks in terms of the people who are founding schools and risks in terms of the parents who are sending their kids. In terms of the founders, I think people are dying to take the risk because people have been reined in by the system for so long that they no longer are deriving much professional satisfaction out of their work. And so I think there are a lot of people who have been involved in education, either as teachers or principals or as consultants or somewhere on the periphery of education, who have been dying for the opportunity to take this risk. And so for them, it's sure it's a risk. I mean, if you're a public school teacher who's got tenure and you go off and you want to start a charter school, well, you're putting your career at risk. But I think that's a risk that, first of all, people in other lines of work take every day, and second of all, is a risk that a lot of teachers are excited about taking. The other risk is parents sending their kids to the schools. And there's certainly a certain amount of risk there. These are new schools. They may not succeed. They may fail. They may close if not enough parents send their kids there. Nonetheless, in a lot of school districts, the greater risk is sending your kids to the traditional public school. Certainly in Boston and in other urban areas, but also in suburban and rural communities as well. The school districts aren't performing that well. And there's a greater risk in sending your child to the traditional public school system than there is in trying something new. I mean, in Boston, again, which is perhaps an extreme example in Massachusetts, but in Boston, about a third of the students never graduate. They drop out of the system. And of those who do graduate, only about 40% are able to read at a 9th grade level. And if you look at some of the statistics around black children who graduate from or who enter the Boston public school system, the chance of or the percentage of those children who go on to graduate from a four-year college is 2%. I mean, so the statistics indicate that the risk of staying in the system is often much greater than the risk of trying something new that offers the promise, at least, of success. Let's see. There's a criticism that's made sometimes of charter schools that these are going to skim the best students from the public school system, and the public schools will be left as the dumping ground, and the charter schools will have all the best students. And of course they'll be successful, because if you've got students who have great talent, you can't help but succeed. Well, there have been 63 charter school applications that have been put in as of now, and I don't know what the exact percentage is, but the vast majority of them turn that whole notion on its head, meaning specifically the charter school applicants are focusing on those kids who are most underserved by the present system. There are almost no schools for gifted children. There are very few applications that are trying to very narrowly focus their attention on the top 10% of the student population. These schools are trying to focus, in fact, on kids at risk, on kids who've already dropped out of the system, on kids who are not performing well and who the system ignores. So in fact, I mean, I wouldn't have predicted this at the beginning, but the way it's turned out is that these charter school applicants are focusing on the exact opposite population than was expected by some of the critics. Where critics were thinking that they were going to skim the cream off the top, they're actually looking at scraping from the bottom of the barrel. So I mean, I think that argument is proven, in fact, through experience, just to be off the mark.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I don't think so. I think you covered the territory.
So, what I'd like to
Can I
start
just
with...
sneak a peek through here? I'm
Sure.
curious what it...
Certainly. It's black and white, but it will come out in color.
Yeah, you got a little dragon in your ear.
Those are the non-believers.
That's what they'll remember is the dragon, right?
So if we can start by just you introducing yourself, what your title is and what you do here.
Okay. My name is Virginia Greiman. I'm General Counsel to the Secretary of Education for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and we're responsible for reviewing all policy and making all policy recommendations regarding public education to the Governor of Massachusetts, William F. Weld.
Where did the concept of charter schools begin?
The concept of charter schools actually began in the early 1970s when there were several publications that dealt with the issue of a new concept in public education. From these publications, public schools started to take a look at their own programs, and across the country legislation was enacted that provided for academies, which were actually schools within public schools, and also provided for magnet schools to allow for diversity in education, to address the problems of the inner cities. And there was experimentation throughout the country in the form of these academies and magnet schools, and in the form of school choice. The opportunity for the students and the parents to actually have an alternative to the traditional public school system.
And how does that fit into the school choice concept?
The school choice concept provides an option for public school students other than attending private schools. And it provides for them new ways of learning, new opportunities to focus in on areas where there is a particular need for the skills in the community. It's an opportunity to break the mold and to do something different from what is currently being offered in the public school system.
What are the goals and objectives of charter schools?
The broad goal is to provide models for other public schools and to be able to compete not only locally but nationally and internationally with the finest schools that are offering programs throughout the world. And it is an opportunity to be free from traditional public school regulations and curriculums, to have an opportunity to provide new learning programs, new ways of teaching, and new ways of assessing students' progress within the schools. It's an opportunity to involve the entire community in developing new models for education.
What are the
Can I interrupt here? Curriculums is not a word, it's curricula.
Okay.
Can she just say that again? Can that
Absolutely.
be-
You want to take that from the top?
I don't know.
How do you edit?
Well, I can just. At what point did she say that? Was it
About in the middle, that's
About in the
why.
just saying at any point?
Curricula.
Okay, excellent. Okay, would you like to move on?
Fine.
Okay. What kinds of solutions do you anticipate being replicated in the public school system from charter schools?
I think one of the strongest replications that we will see is in the extension of the school day and the school year. I think there's a feeling that currently students do not have sufficient time during the school day to accomplish what they should, and consequently the concept of homework has developed. And if you were to ask a student why they felt they had homework, quite often the response will be, because we don't have time during the school day to finish all the work. And I think the idea of extending the school day so there is time to finish will be a concept that will be widely adopted once the public school system has an opportunity to see how effective it is and how much more students enjoy their learning when they have an opportunity to spend additional time during the school day, rather than bringing everything home with them and feeling that their day is not complete.
Right. In addition, it would probably keep some kids from wandering around the mall.
That's true. It will provide an opportunity not just to concentrate on academic subjects, but to concentrate on extracurricular activities and develop an interest in, a greater interest in sports, an opportunity to learn more about their community. We're hoping some of them will have an opportunity to do volunteer work within their community. And this will create great incentive to explore new areas, new talents, and will provide a greater opportunity for students to develop their schools separate and apart from their skills separate and apart from the academic curriculum.
Have you seen solutions emerge from other experimental schools or schools using the charter model?
We have seen through our magnet schools and through our school academies the development of new innovative teaching methods and programs, and particular focus on areas such as science and mathematics, which are skills needed to compete in our global economy today. And through these experiments, we have an opportunity to get a glimpse of the wonderful things that charter schools will be able to do.
Do you want a more specific, Eric?
If possible.
That isn't applied, because the Worcester Academy is a really good example, and they're
Okay.
not applying for a charter, so we don't
Mhm.
get in a pinch.
Mm-hmm.
It's up to you.
You can volunteer that if you want.
Okay. An example of a program that we currently have in Massachusetts is the Worcester Academy, and this provides an opportunity for students in high school to take courses at the college level in mathematics, advanced courses in mathematics and science. And it provides a wonderful opportunity for students to go beyond the curricula currently offered in the high schools in Massachusetts.
Can I be obnoxious and add to that? The other thing is the teachers from Worcester Public High Schools go
Mhm.
into the academy
Mhm.
and learn and take that back into the public high school.
Mhm.
I think the reciprocal
Mhm.
effect is.
Okay. The Academy also provides an opportunity for the faculty currently in the public school system to teach in these programs and develop new innovative ways of teaching mathematics and science beyond what is currently offered in the public high schools.
What about other forms, other humanities? Is there any type of, is there a need to emphasize a broader based humanities program?
There is no question that charter schools will go beyond what is currently being offered in terms of courses in character building, in values, in morals, in developing the whole person and the ability to be prepared to go out into the working environment or to go into further education with a clearer understanding of themselves individually and the skills they will need to communicate once they get beyond the public school system.
How do you see federal government interfacing with the charter school legislation?
I think the federal government, as they observe these models throughout the country, will gain a much greater appreciation for what these independent public schools can do. And I think through their grant programs and through opportunities for these charter schools to apply for grant monies, they will see a tremendous increase in the competition. And through that, I think you will see the federal government wanting to become more and more involved at the national level through their Department of Education. Perhaps at some point even in wanting to participate in the development of these programs.
How will standardized testing be used along with alternative forms of assessment?
The charter schools will be required in Massachusetts to comply with state performance and testing standards. So their curricula will have an emphasis on those skills required to meet those testing requirements. However, we strongly feel that the charter schools will go well beyond these minimum standards of performance now required in the public schools. So they will be required to have innovative methods of assessment that will go well beyond testing, that will involve the student in interaction, in greater use of verbal communication, a finer development of their written communication, and their interaction in general with the not only the students and the faculty, but with the community at large. And it will provide a wonderful opportunity to develop mechanisms for assessment that go well beyond our traditional testing and evaluation programs now used in the public schools.
How is this related to the accountability issue?
When a charter school is established, unlike the traditional public school system, there is a personal commitment that evolves from each of the participants in the charter school system. In the current public school system, when there is a problem within the system, there is often no accountability. One individual will blame another individual, or one institution will blame another institution. In the charter school system, these schools will survive or not based on their personal commitment to this school. If they are not successful, they will not have students that will apply to these charter schools. And they are solely dependent on their own mission and their ability to approve the success of that mission. So there's a dramatic difference in terms of accountability in the charter schools versus the public school system.
It makes it sound like charter schools aren't public. So can you say like the traditional
Yes.
public school system or something?
Yes. So there is a dramatic difference between the accountability that you will see in the charter school system versus the traditional public schools.
Okay. Who's responsible for assessing the development of the charter school within the Office of Education?
There will be a self-evaluation conducted by each school system. They are required to establish standards for evaluation, and they will be required to annually report to the Secretary of Education whether or not they are meeting those performance standards. In addition, the Secretary of Education will conduct an evaluation, an extensive evaluation that will go beyond the current evaluation system for public school systems. And that evaluation will be conducted prior to any renewal of any charter school grants, which are required to occur under current law every 5 years.
What commitments does the Executive Office of Education have to equity and diversity?
The Executive Office of Education, as a criteria to granting a charter, will require that the schools have demonstrated diversity not only in their admissions policy, but diversity in terms of the programs that they are offering, and diversity in terms of the attraction of students within the communities in which they are located. The law currently requires that the student population be diverse in terms of ethnicity, in terms of race, in terms of athletic performance, in terms of academic criteria. And these schools are prohibited from discriminating in any of the traditional ways. And in addition, they are prohibited in discriminating based on academic achievement and athletic performance.
How will the department encourage this within charter schools?
The department will encourage it through requiring the charter schools to demonstrate that they have reached out to their community, that they have provided for a broad base in terms of their admission criteria, and that their program and that their curricula involves the diversity of the community within their educational program.
In what ways could private and parochial schools convert to a charter system?
Private and parochial schools are both prohibited from applying for a charter school grant. However, to the extent a private or parochial school is interested in becoming a charter school, they have an opportunity to start afresh and apply for a charter school grant as long as they are in compliance with all of the charter school requirements, which would mean in the case of a parochial school, their funding would come from public school funding and not from private school funding. Their teaching curriculum could not be focused on religious teaching. They would be required, as all charter schools are, to have a broad focus on curricula and to meet the requirements of the state performance and testing requirements.
In what ways will charter schools detract from other public schools?
We hope that there will not be a detraction from the public school system, but we hope there will be a cooperation with the public schools and an opportunity to work together. And that's one of the criteria we will be looking at as we assess these applications, to see what support these charter schools have gendered within the current public school system. Have they gone to the school committee? Have they gone to the public schools to recruit teachers? Have they gone to the public schools to recruit administrators? And what efforts are they making to work together with the public schools in an effort to enhance what is currently offered in the public schools, and to work together and learn from each other and develop models that can be utilized in the public school systems within the districts in which these charter schools are located.
What is the role of back to basics or basic skills instruction in the charter school movement?
In terms of addressing the basic skills, we hope these charter schools will provide all the basic skills and more, but provide different ways of teaching and learning the basic skills. Go beyond the traditional structure of the classroom with rows and ringing bells, and provide an opportunity for interdisciplinary studies and educate public school students in ways that go far beyond what we have been traditionally able to offer in the traditional public school setting.
What would an example, how would you define interdisciplinary studies?
Interdisciplinary studies would be an opportunity for the public school teachers in the area of history, mathematics, science to come together and offer a course that would provide studies in all of these areas in one course. For example, you might have a course in the environment, and students would have an opportunity to learn about the implications of their environment through economics, what it costs to clean up a hazardous waste site. And that hazardous waste site might be within their own community. They would involve economics, mathematics, the sciences that are involved in cleaning up a hazardous waste site, all in one course. And they will have learned about their environment, about mathematics, about economics, and about science within looking at one project that affects them personally within their community.
In what ways can traditional academic and so-called non-academic areas mesh within the school reform?
They can mesh through a program that will require students to think about not only what they're learning, for example, about history in this country, but they're learning about how they fit into this history. And they're learning about how the decisions they make in the future can be better decisions based on what we have learned from our past, both nationally and locally within our communities. They can look at their local school governance. They can look at the local school committees. They can look at the State Department of Education. They can look at the Federal Department of Education. And they can look internationally at what schools are doing worldwide and compare all of these systems historically and prospectively and learn how we can do things better. And that is just one example of one focus, looking at education from the past and where we're going in the future. And we hope that will be applied in all disciplines.
How will diversity issues be emphasized or accented in the charter school program?
That's a very important question because it really is central to the success of these schools, that they consider other cultures and how they will bring those cultures into the education process. It is so important for students today to understand who they are and how they fit into their local community, how they fit into their school district, how they fit into their state, how they fit into this nation, and how they fit into this world. And consequently, we feel it's essential that the charter schools develop programs that will be multicultural and will involve the students in learning about themselves through learning about other cultures, through learning about the mistakes they've made and learning about the things that they have done right that we can do better. And they will learn this through language programs, through history programs, through learning about values and morals, learning about how they can be better citizens here, through how things are done better throughout the world.
On what basis are you deciding whom will be granted a charter?
We are looking first at the quality of these charter schools. In Massachusetts, we are at this point limited to selecting 25 charter schools. We have 64 applicants. Therefore, we are most concerned about granting these applications to the charter schools that have shown and demonstrated that they are ready through their educational programs, through their governance, through their admission criteria, through the need for the charter school and the location in which they have selected, that they are ready to open a school that will be financially feasible, which will be operationally feasible, and most important, will offer an innovative educational opportunity in the programs that they offer, in the teaching methods, and most important, in the methods of assessing the students' progress.
How will parents be involved with these charter schools?
In all applications that we review, it is critical that there is parental involvement, and that parental involvement can take place through having the parents participate on the governing board, through having an advisory council of parents, through showing that the parents have been involved in the establishment of the charter school within the location selected, and seeking the parents' thoughts and ideas on developing a public school that is better than the current public schools that exist within their district.
Why would parents want to send their children to a charter school?
For parents, it provides a choice, an opportunity for their child to do better. And parents should look very closely at these charter schools, at the programs they offer, at how the parents will be involved in the charter schools. They should take a close look at the educational programs, at the methods of assessment, and I think they will find when they compare them to the educational programs currently being offered in public schools that they go well beyond in providing greater opportunities for their children to learn, to become better citizens, to become more actively involved in their communities, and to think more about what they want to do with their futures and what their opportunities are, and to provide greater growth in terms of character development, in terms of value development, and we hope that they will find that this is a better choice for them and that they will not be timid about trying the charter school. They always have an opportunity to go back, and the law provides that opportunity to go back to the public school system. But we're hoping that they will decide that this is a better choice for their child.
What benefit would teachers gain from transferring to a charter school?
Teachers will gain in several ways. They will have an opportunity to be directly involved in developing the educational program and the curricula of that charter school. The law requires that the Board of Trustees work with the teachers in developing the educational program. This is something that does not currently exist in the traditional public school system. In addition, teachers will be free from the current restrictions set by unions in terms of salaries, promotional opportunities, and benefits. So teachers have a greater opportunity to not only earn a higher salary, but develop themselves as individuals within these charter schools and create greater opportunities for themselves professionally, whether they desire to remain as teachers or go on in the educational field and develop as administrators, develop as writers, develop individually their skills in the educational community.
Could you address the benefits issue again in terms of how their health insurance will transfer into the charter school system?
In Massachusetts, public school teachers that would like to teach within a charter school will be granted a 2-year leave of absence. So they will have an opportunity to decide whether or not they want to remain within the charter school. During this 2-year period, their benefits will continue. They will have an opportunity to remain in the retirement system. After the 2-year period expires, their benefits will be determined by the charter school, and that will include their health benefits, that will include their promotional opportunities, that will include their salary. After the 2-year period, they will no longer be able to retain the benefits of the public school system. However, the hope is that the benefits will be far greater, and that leaving their local union will provide them an opportunity to do things that they are unable to currently do within their current union structure. Of course, because in Massachusetts they will have an opportunity to form a new union if they choose to do so and retain rights of collective bargaining in Massachusetts, they will be able to do that beyond the 2-year period. But we are hoping they may decide that they no longer need the protection of the union because there will be greater opportunities provided beyond the current protections that are provided in the traditional public school system.
Good answer, Jenny.
What's that? Okay. whenever you want.
Okay. And one final point on the benefit to teachers, they remain as state employees, so consequently their pensions will remain with them. And I think that's of great concern to teachers that have been spent expensive cut.
Okay, you can do it again. That's the
Oh, okay,
beauty
just
of
keep
editing.
going.
Yeah.
One final point on the benefit to teachers in the charter schools is their opportunity to retain their pension, particularly for those that have had many years in the public school system. They will remain as state employees, and therefore their pension will go with them to the charter school.
What about the salary issue in terms of limits?
The sky is the limit in terms of the salary issue. It is up to the charter school to develop their own human resource plan, and based on their tuition and any private funding they receive, they can determine their own salaries. And I am sure they will determine salaries based on the quality of the teacher, on the merits, on improvement, and I think there will be far greater opportunities, salary-wise, ultimately for teachers in the charter schools than currently exist in the public school system.
In an article in the Boston Globe.
I said public school system again. Instead.
It's just if it's interspersed,
Okay.
that's all I was concerned
Okay.
about. I didn't make a face at her, that wasn't my fault.
Okay. We're ready to move on. This is the last and final question,
Okay.
unless there's anything you want to add. In an article in the Boston Globe, the Secretary of Education, Erik Peterson, was quoted as saying, "It's a risk to break the mold, to do something different. It's not for the faint of heart." Why would people want to take risks in restructuring education?
Because if you don't take a risk, you never grow and you never learn. Some of the greatest challenges in this country have been met through risk-taking. And if we truly want to compete worldwide, we are going to have to do better and offer better than our current public school systems provide. Risk-taking, as Secretary Robertson has stated, is not for the faint of heart. It does take courage. You have to be willing and ready to challenge yourself. And this is why we encourage everyone to look very closely at the opportunities these charter schools offer, and to look at them early on, and to get involved in the process early on, and to have the courage to want to better yourself. We all know that the public schools currently are not living up to our greatest expectations, that we are criticized for not living up to what is needed to meet worldwide economic concerns. And we are hoping that charter schools will provide this opportunity to break this mold through taking risks. Didn't like that at all.
Okay, you can do that again if you want.
That's a hard one. Pia Dad will do that.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Because Ann would tell me, she's very
Yes.
honest. I love her for it.
You come across as, well, you do, you know, as yourself.
All right.
Okay. So,
I've had no media training whatsoever, ever.
well, you've had training in
But now I'm getting it, and this one's going to make a star out of me. She's wonderful.
an opportunity.
Yes, she's great.
Did I mention the Wall Street Journal wants to come?
There's been talk that charter schools will create dumping grounds, will convert the public schools into dumping grounds. How do you feel about that?
I feel this is a very unfortunate misconception about charter schools and what they aim to do. And I think what is interesting is that so many of these charter schools are trying to develop innovative ways of learning to reach students that currently do not have the opportunities available to them. These schools are designed to reach many populations. They are designed to reach those at high risk. They are designed to reach those that have difficulty academically. They are designed to reach those that desire something more from the traditional methods of teaching. And if there is one thing charter schools are not, they are not schools for the elite. You will find the breadth of program offerings varies from military schools to environmental schools, schools for the high-risk student, schools that will offer an opportunity to focus in particular areas like mathematics, science, economics, languages. It is an opportunity to allow students to be their best and to learn in the best possible environment. So clearly, charter schools, I would say, are anything but dumping grounds, but provide an opportunity to reach students at all levels of ability, academically, and personally.
Are charter schools going to be private with public funds?
Charter schools are clearly public schools. The money will follow the student, the public school money, and they will be subject to some public school regulation, including state performance and testing standards. They are governed by a distinct legal entity, the Board of Trustees. What do we want to emphasize here? We want to emphasize the funding.
One thing that I think is,
Whenever you're ready. Are these going to be private schools with public funds?
These are clearly public schools funded by public monies, and the tuition money will follow the student where the student chooses to go. I think what is most important is to understand that it provides choices for students who otherwise could not afford these choices. Students who cannot afford private school tuition will have an opportunity to go to a public school that will provide opportunities that currently exist in private schools, but will have this opportunity paid for out of public monies. This is free public education, and I cannot say it in any simpler terms.
How will the charter schools affect the innovative programs that currently exist within education, public education?
The alternative programs that currently exist, we hope will continue to exist. They're certainly not required to apply for a charter to survive, and we hope they continue to do the wonderful things they're doing. To the extent they decide that they at some time would like to become a charter school, we welcome them with open arms. But in the interim, we hope that they will continue with their alternative creative programs, because that's what charter schools are all about, innovation.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
no, those were great answers.
Am I getting better as I go along?
Those were short and sweet.
Yeah.
My name's John Peters, and I'm the executive director of the Massachusetts Commission on Indian Affairs. And I had this young fellow come in and want to interview me on education and talk about education and the way that we look at it and feel about education. And of course, we have a problem trying to deal with education today and the results of what education has produced out here in the society we're living in. And some of the issues that I look at, and I've worked with a lot of the colleges and universities here that have been in the business of creating teachers, educating students to become teachers, and I'm trying to give them a base to work from, and from a cultural standpoint, and so that they could understand more about where we're coming from in education. I was a really fortunate person to be born in the all-Indian community and grow up in that community, and got a very clear understanding about a philosophy and a culture of people and about the importance of the things that are around you, and the importance about being a human being. And we have a great many principles that we try to pass on to our children, and about being that human being. And basically what transpires there, that I was given a very clear understanding that I was born as an independent sovereign being, and that word sovereign is a very important factor in my life, because the meaning is it means having absolute control over oneself, and the way we feel about it and see it. And the society that is the predominant society in this country today isn't of our culture, and it's the makeup of many cultures that have come from many backgrounds that have had many problems, and most of them came here to get away from those problems, and they brought a lot of their garbage with them, and their education with them, and their mindset with them, and so they've really subdued a culture that has lived here for thousands of years without the same kind of understanding. And the elders in my community are very important. I'm one of the elders now, and this is the highlight of my life, is to be able to pass on the wisdom and the knowledge that I have acquired over the years of my life, and I've taken that on as a role and as a goal to try to do that, and to nurture that culture and the understanding as much as I can with my people and other people, because we've run into so many roadblocks by not allowing the other cultures to benefit from our knowledge of what's around us and where we're coming from. And so we've been, rejected, and we have suffered through a lot of racism and prejudices because of that. And I don't want to really get into the whole religious persecution thing, but education is very important. The education that I was fortunate enough to really get involved with was about all the elements and all the creation around me, and the purpose for that. And through that I learned that I had a special place here on this earth, and I had a special connection, and I have a reason for being here, okay? And most people go through life and never know why they're here. I mean, they don't know why they're living. They don't know what their life is about and why they should be living. And I've been fortunate enough to been given the gift of understanding my purpose for being here, and it's a good feeling when you can fulfill that reason and that purpose for being here on this earth. And it's not about money, and it's not about becoming somebody that people look up to for things that make them powerful or in control of other human beings, or manipulative of things that go on around. But it's about being able to share and give and to love freely without looking for something in return. And those are the kind of things that are really important in life. And that sharing was a key factor in my community as I grew up. And all the children belong to everyone, so you look out for the children. It wasn't that important about the parents. It was important that those children were taken care of and looked out for and watched over and educated. When I wanted to learn about things in the woods. I went to the person that I felt had the most knowledge about the woods, and they told me about the trees and why the trees were different, and what gifts that the trees brought to bear. And when I wanted to learn about the animals, I went to the person that was the best hunter, the one that knew about the animals. And when I wanted to learn about fishing, I went to the best fisherman. And my father wasn't any of those. And he was a politician. And so when I wanted to learn about politics, that's when I went to my father. But prior to that, I went to these other people in the community. And they shared that knowledge with me and gift. And I began to really find where I belonged in this world, and what reason and what purpose I was here for. And I began to look at my relatives there in that community, and I began to understand what they were all about and why they was there. And so our education became a really kind of difficult thing, because we had non-natives that were educating us, but in a way that they knew best. And it didn't really, it really didn't work with us in a way. Native people are brilliant. I mean, my people are really brilliant. They retain things a lot longer than other people, and they are way ahead of sometimes the teacher. And but it isn't for us to show knowledge in the same sense that other people. And we don't compete with one another. We have a problem in a competitive field. And so most people think we're either backwards or stupid because we don't show off our knowledge or don't apply it. Sometimes it's from the front to us. Just for an example, the English story about Red Riding Hood and the wolf that ate up the grandmother. That was devastating to me, because in my community, the Wampanoag people have taken a totem of the wolf, because the wolf was the most beautiful animal that had the lesson about how to keep a family together and maintain for a family and all the relatives of that family. And here we had to listen to this story about this bad wolf that had eaten up the grandmother, and so, that was devastating to me and I was only a youngster, and I had to listen to that story. And so the rest of the stories, Jack and Jill and all of that kind of mumble jumble didn't really mean much to me, okay? Because those stories had no connection with me, or my people. They was offensive, and they talked about us the same way. The history in this country is deplorable, and it's never been really truthful. And it's a lot of untruths that have been placed here. And one of the things in my community that was very sacred was being truthful and being your word, being your bond in that community, and that was sacred. And a person's word, he was only as good as his word, and if you didn't abuse that you didn't disrespect anyone with the untruth. And
how would you like to see education change? How would you like to see education?
I would like to see the children dealing with the truth, but I'd also like to see them dealing with finding out who they are at first. Most people have never really found out who they are. They've become the greatest actors in the world, and they play acting and never display who they are. You see, the elders told us that we were all born independent, sovereign beings, and that we was all different. There was no two of us alike. There was not another one of me nowhere else in the world. It never had been one before. And I was given many gifts to share. But I was also given a set of instructions about my life and how I was to relate to the rest of creation around me. And, and that's what I strive to try to do, is to relate to creation and understand about the environment and the other creation, whether it's the plant life, or animal life, or bird life, or fish life, or even the little creepy crawlers. They all have a purpose. And far as I know, if they're not haven't been domesticated, they still follow their instructions. You know, we see the birds in the fall get up and fly off, and we see them come back in the spring, and we see the fish come up the rivers. They are still following instructions. And man, you know, he lost his way. He doesn't follow his instructions, so he has very little connection with what's around him, and he often destroys the very necessity of creation that is going to help him during his lifetime and in his children's lifetime. The instructions that the elders gave us, that our purpose in life was to preserve a legacy on this planet for our children. And it talks about 7 generations of unborn yet to come here. And that's what our purpose is. It's about how to leave that legacy, how to leave the waters so that they can drink them, in the air so they can breathe the air, and the different plant life and animal life, so that they will know the reason for them being here and the connection that they have with the other forms of life. That's what we see as education about. I mean, we can go out here and talk about high tech, but high tech has a way of taking away from you and leaving you naked without any knowledge about yourself or what's around you, okay? And I see it's worsening every day. No one has really too much reason for being alive because they're not exercising anything that they've been put here to exercise. So if education doesn't capture some of the reality about life in itself, then it's done nothing. You know, gold, you can't eat gold. And I look at this city here that I'm sitting in the middle of, and it's like a vacuum. It just takes in, it puts out nothing. You know, you just imagine the people that are sitting there pushing paper that doesn't really affect anything to do with your life, you know, and living. And, you know, you can't eat that, you know. And it doesn't put out anything, you know, in the city. And you just imagine that. All the different offices around here, what do they really have to do with life, okay, in a natural way, okay? So anyhow, I don't know what more I could tell you.
That's very complete.
Yeah. There was just these gals over there about all the plaques that I've got around here.
Oh, yeah.
Going into school, they keep sending me all these plaques. What do you say, Joseph?
Hey, brother.
How you doing? Get that job, did you?
Oh, did I take that? Well, let's see.
an oasis on top of the volcano. The vegetation, including wild tomatoes, feeds birds and land iguanas. While looking for a place to camp, we came across some steaming fumaroles, proof of high temperatures below the surface. We found a safe spot to put down our heavy backpacks, and our tents went up quickly. It was hard for us to believe we were actually going to sleep on an active volcano.
Well, thank you, Harolda, for that lesson in the geology and the origin of the islands. And if you'll just hang around down there, we're going to go to our downlink sites again for our second rounds of questions. And we're going to go to National Geographic, and we're going to go to Charles. Go ahead, Charles.
Hello, Bob. What specific types of scientific research made you come to Galapagos instead of any other volcanic island?
Well, Harolda, what brought you to the Galapagos Islands? Why did you come here? What's unique about them?
Well, Charles, the research on the geology of the Galapagos is just beginning. It'll probably be the young scientists of your generation that will do most of the work here because there's a lot to do. And we're just scratching the surface, but we know that this is an ideal place to study the birth and the evolution of volcanoes from the time that they begin to grow underwater until they emerge as islands. Now, there's a lot of activity that takes place between the birth of the volcano at great depth and its emergence at the surface. So this is perhaps one of the best places to study that particular transition from the seawater, underwater growth to the island formation in the Galapagos. And we've seen a little bit of this type of volcano in the Galapagos, in the western islands, there near Isabella, where we see these beautiful ash cones that are built up of thousands of ash layers, and these are produced by steam explosions between the seawater and the molten rock, creating steam explosions that form these ash layers and built up the earliest part of the islands. And I think a future research in that area in the Galapagos is very important.
Also, Charles, the fact that the Galapagos Islands are so barren, for a geologist to be able to see the outcrops, to be able to actually see the volcanic countryside, even that which is old, it's easier to explore than an area where there's a lot of tropical growth. For example, in Hawaii, the older islands are heavily covered with vegetation. It's very hard for a geologist to get at them, whereas here, as you can see, it's so easy. All right, well, let's go to Jordan at the Ontario Science Center. Go ahead, Jordan.
Because the Galapagos Islands were so remote, how were all the animals reacting to all the humans coming to the islands and studying?
Well, to begin with, they're not allowed in very much area. What, less than 1%?
Yeah,
right?
There's a very small area that people are actually allowed on, although scientists can go to the other places. But with the animals of Galapagos, since there were no native predators, or very, very few, the animals were very tame
Even
to
before
begin
people
with.
came,
To begin
right.
with, and when people came, what happens, especially at the visitor sites, it's interesting. The animals at the visitor sites become even more tame because the visitors are not allowed to bother the animals, touch the animals. They can simply photograph them, as you see here, and if the animal approaches them, it's fine. But since they don't bother the animals just remain very tame, and you can be very close to them.
And you have a guide with you at all times. You're not allowed to just wander around on the islands. There's very precise places, very precise paths, and you're constantly with you is a park guide, a park warden, or depends upon their different type of person it is. But they're the ones that really control your behavior. All right, well, let's go to Jason at the Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institution at Fort Pierce. Go ahead, Jason.
How does the iguana serve in the food chain?
Well, Jason, I heard that great crowd roar. That sounds like a great class there this morning. Linda, could you answer that question?
Yes. The iguana, it's interesting in Galapagos because of the lack of predator, the iguana is very high on the food chain. In terms of the native animals, iguanas only have predators at the very young stages. The hatchling iguanas, marine iguanas, and land iguanas can be killed by the hawks, for example. And it wasn't until we had introduced animals like dogs that there was really a predator that could then kill the adults. So the iguanas they're completely herbivorous. The marine iguanas feed on algae, and the land iguanas feed on plants.
So it's a very simple food chain.
Right.
Not too many members in it. I mean, particularly the marine iguana, it's the algae, and then the iguana eats it, and then, like Linda says, fortunately, a few eat the iguana. All right, well, we're now going to go to our remote flying section. We're going to go out to California, to the Orange County Marine Institute, Dana Point. Are you up in line there?
Yeah, we are, Bob.
A little early in the morning
Mark
there.
Adams here with me.
A little early, Nathan, all right?
Yeah, it's actually on the West Coast. It's just before 8.
Well, let's get into it right away. Go ahead and establish communications with the ROV boat.
Okay, we're all set. If we can get, hopefully get Martin on the line, he can give him an idea
Nathan,
of where we
I'm
are
here.
and what we should be doing.
All right, Martin.
I'm here.
You're hooked
what's the
up
name of our
and
pilot?
transfer control over to Mark and let him get going.
What's the name of the pilot this morning, Nathan?
Mark
we have
Adams.
Mark here.
Mark? Okay, Mark, you now have control. I just switched over my joystick to you, and I no longer am flying the little Mark II. You're facing the Mark IV, that yellow vehicle. There's a left turn. And there's a right turn, I believe.
Yeah, come back around to the right and establish. Try to stay visual contact, Mark, with the other vehicle by just twisting right. There's a sea lion. There it is.
Come back down a little bit, Scott.
All right.
So we can see the bottom, too.
All right, he went zooming by. He wants to drive.
He's off. He wants to go drive.
All right, watch the
All right.
rocks, Mark.
It's all right. It's a very low mileage unit we have here.
He's just trucking right away. He doesn't want to mess around.
There he goes.
Where's that sea lion?
Oh, the sea lion's behind you now.
The sea lion's behind you, Mark. You took off. Best is
Can I
to
turn
move
off?
slow.
The sea lions can run circles around your ROV, so
Yeah, if you twist,
you'll just have
twist
to wait
left,
for them
Mark.
to come back.
Twist left like you're doing.
That's good.
Oh, there's
There
a
he is.
sea lion. There it
Hey,
is.
come back here.
Well, you're not going to catch him, Mark. He can make you look like a real amateur underwater. There they are. Don't attack him, Mark.
Okay.
Slow
Turn to the
down
left
a
just
little.
slightly.
Pull
Turn
off
to
the
the
gas. The more you go slow, the more they'll come near you. If you go after them, they're going to take off.
Turn left, Mark.
Turn left.
You're drifting to the right.
There you go.
Turn left. Turn left.
Bob, Mark was telling me earlier that his classmates were encouraging him to chase anything he saw, so I guess he's putting that into action.
Well, there's a park warden down there. It's that yellow vehicle. And you'll get arrested if you harass the animals. Want to thank all of you for joining us as Mark's driving. We'll let him keep going for a while. We hope you enjoyed your expedition to the Galapagos Islands.
Okay.
And we really enjoyed bringing it to you. It was a lot of fun. Also, this is the special broadcast of the day when we're going to be going to a number of sites. In addition to our 20 downlink sites, we're going out into the Turner Educational Network, and we're also with the EDS network, the Mentor Network. So we have quite a number of other sites. I think close to 2,000 other locations are hooked in on this hour. If you want to get involved and learn more about the project, you can contact what we call the Jason fax line. Now, each of those documents costs about $1.50, but you can get a complete photocopy of the program, and you can duplicate it for the whole school. Now, if you want to get a copy of that fax, just call 1-800-626-8232. That's 1-800-626-8232, and you can get a copy of the program and what went on today. It's sort of a way of keeping our hotline and keep track of what's going on in the Galapagos Islands.